Back in the late 70s, feminism was invented by Sigourney Weaver when she outlasted every male character in a horror movie against a space alien specifically designed to horrifically violate your body, and then killed it with a jet engine. In the 80s, an era known for giant bodybuilders shooting each other in the jungle, we started to consider the female experience with characters like Sarah Connor, who goes from normal girl to guerrilla warfare expert, not necessarily because she wanted to, but because she's forced to constantly be on guard for her son's life after a time traveler gets her pregnant and then tells her the kid will be the savior of humanity, and nobody believes her and they throw her in an asylum. That is not a man's story. If it had been a single dad teaching his kid military tactics to survive the inevitable apocalypse, that would just be your average Texan. Things only grew from there, and by the 2000s we had Totally Spies, The Powerpuff Girls, Witch, Sailor Moon, My Life as a Teenage Robot, Ella Enchanted, H2O, Veronica Mars. Once it clicked that writing stories about girls being action heroes in a girl way was something that you could sell to girls, studios were suddenly all over it. Who would have guessed? While some writers clearly had this all figured out, it was around this time that we also saw the emergence of a problem that would cause the female action hero to backslide into a stoic and theoretically self-sufficient cardboard cutout who takes shit from no one but the audience and is secretly sad and also wears a cat suit for some reason. A problem that would eventually try to course correct itself by replacing any skills or abilities deemed unrealistic with ignorantly traditional feminine traits, ultimately resulting in the same gender stereotypes we first broke away from back in the 70s. A problem named Neil. Neil. Classic Neil. I did that for the joke, but it's actually mostly Craig. And before that, it was Joss Whedon. I firmly believe that there is no better window into someone's mind than the things they choose to write, and if you pay attention to the perspective in their narratives, you can understand exactly how they view the world, regardless of anything they might say to the contrary. Sometimes it's pure speculation, but a lot of times, they will eventually confirm your suspicions all on their own. There's a recurring type of writer who coincidentally tends to look like your super chill college professor who suddenly stopped working there for some reason, who has decided that gender equality and the female action hero trope are extremely important to him, and he'd really like you to know. Joss Whedon practically built his career on writing strong female leads. He even won an award for it, where his acceptance speech was a bizarrely performative and well-rehearsed stand-up routine featuring all of his most famous quotes.
Why do you write these strong women characters? Because you're still asking me that question. Thank you.
Since we're living in the future, we know that Joss Whedon has been accused of a variety of abusive behaviors and misconduct towards several of the women and men he's worked with during his career. Who could have predicted that? From the 90s to like 2012, our expectations were honestly so low that as long as your protagonist rolled her eyes while she was being captured, you'd not only rise above most of your competition, but also be praised for your bravery.
We need equality. Kinda now.
Shockingly, that didn't end sexism. Trying to write a crime-fighting cheerleader or any variation of the female action hero without actually understanding how a woman would experience that role always results in a shallow imitation that becomes incredibly easy to spot once you know what you're looking for. Joss Whedon's women are all traditionally movie hot, deeply traumatized, emotionally repressed, and somehow both helpless and untouchable at the same time. Buffy is a cheerleader and punished for having feelings, Inara is a high-class courtesan with a PhD in quiet suffering, and River Tam is introduced naked in a box before spending most of the series barefoot and feral, and Black Widow is introduced in the Avengers tied to a chair like this. Like it's a fetish, obviously. It's the Tarantino foot thing all over again.
I was going to include an example of his foot shots, but I think it's even funnier that I couldn't download this compilation because it's age restricted on YouTube.
Quentin has separated more women from their shoes than the TSA.
There's a chance this isn't a universal issue and might be more exclusive to American live-action nerd cinema. Like, there could be other mediums or subgenres that don't really struggle so much with the, you know, never mind. This is more of a personal preference than a hard and fast writing rule, but I think I should not be able to see your fetish in your writing at all. If I can, you are either too horny to be writing my favorite sci-fi show, or you're not good enough at it to integrate your preferences effectively into your world building, and at that point, can you even call yourself a writer? I'm not saying that Buffy or Firefly or anime are bad. As I've said before, movies and television are a collaborative effort. A lot of artists add their input to the final product, a lot of accidents happen along the way, and the final depiction of a character might still work out regardless of the original motivations of the writer. I'm just saying that if you compare the similarities across a writer's entire body of work and then compare that to how how they've tried to represent themselves, you can usually cut through to their actual perspective. You can start to notice when other positive influences aren't present anymore, like how Dr. Horrible Sing-Along Blog was written by Joss Whedon plus his two brothers and his wife Marissa Tancherone, who would later co-create and showrun Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., whereas the one where he had almost total creative control was Dollhouse, a show about rentable women who got their memories wiped every episode. Even when these guys' fictional women aren't offensively sexist, you know what they're still not? Kim Possible. These aren't the only people writing our female protagonists. There are still plenty of places to find good ones. She-Ra definitely built on the progress of the cartoons from my childhood. Animated films have kept their female audience in mind with things like Inside Out, Turning Red, and Nimona. We've also had Vi and Jinx in Arcane Season 1, Furiosa and Mad Max Fury Road, Wednesday Addams of all people. It has been done well, repeatedly and simultaneously. Joss Whedon's Black Widow and Katniss Everdeen were first in theaters in the same year. Different mediums also develop at different paces. You can find a lot of honest female representation in novels and comics these days, while video games have historically been a few steps behind. Hell, 10 years ago Anita Sarkeesian tried making some videos about this same topic, and the backlash invented modern fascism. But these specific writers who display clear signs of not understanding what it means to write women well, while also making a big deal about how strong their female characters are so they can be praised for it, are for some reason the ones who keep getting hired to write the biggest blockbuster adaptations of our era, and somehow everybody always seems confused when the things they make turn out to be terrible. So I think it's about time we learn how to identify them before they become a problem, and to do that, we need to know what it looks like to actually write women well. When it was first released in 2013, The Last of Us was an exceedingly rare standout in the world of video games. Its narrative strength came from its deeply human relationships, including two women who actually acted and dressed like they were in a post-apocalypse. Tess, in particular, felt like a lost cousin of those 80s action heroes. Tough, decisive, commanding respect, but also not hiding her emotions. And Ellie, of course, grew up from a vulnerable, scrappy kid into a fully realized, terrifyingly capable action hero in her own right. It was the kind of writing that proved games could match or even surpass Hollywood. In 2019, the sequel was met with a controversial reception, but I didn't play it in 2019. I didn't play either of them until deep into COVID when my brother was insisting I'd really like these two zombie games I was never interested in. And so I played through both games back to back and realized how wrong I was. Spoilers for everything in The Last of Us beyond this point. I don't know what you thought was going to happen if you weren't expecting that, but just in case, this is the official warning. Settled in? Alright, good. Joel dies, like, right away. I heard later that a lot of people didn't like that. I thought it was great, but I also didn't wait 6 years for the game to come out, so I kind of get it. But experiencing the story as one continuous narrative, I actually thought it made perfect sense, and I was totally on board with the emotional journey they had decided to take me on. Functionally, Joel's story was done, and we were on to Ellie now, and Ellie's biggest fear is being alone, and what better way to explore that than taking away her closest friend. And from a practical perspective, somebody was gonna do it eventually. Joel kills more people's dads than the American healthcare system. The second game is then about revenge and anger and grief. And that's because it's a woman's story. Writing realistic women is not just about giving women the same roles as men, or letting them keep their femininity at the same time. Being honest about the experience of your characters requires accepting that some of your own fundamental values simply don't exist inside that person's reality. Morals are contextual. We all live inside our own rule books that feel so normal to us we mistake them for universal truths. But if those rules change, our morals and values don't automatically map over the same way, and they do change dramatically between people with different kinds of power and protection. If you want to truly understand how to write women, pay attention now, because there may be no clearer place to see this difference than in how stories handle revenge. The first half of this game is pretty damn great. These characters feel more alive and real than some real living people I know, their motivations and mistakes make sense, their interactions feel human, the intentional timing of the flashbacks makes sure we are emotionally locked in with Ellie the entire time. I actually finally understood the purpose of nonlinear storytelling because of this game. But by the back half, it starts to lose itself. It tries to hammer in this neat moral about how violence just breeds more violence, and it scolds its own characters and you for perpetuating it, which completely undercuts what the story has actually been about so far. Joel gets exactly what he wants in the first game because of violence. He saves Ellie. It's not even about violence being good or bad, it's just his go-to tool for surviving in a world that's already stripped morality down to the bones. The ending is about how, for the first time in 20 years, he uses it to save someone he can't live without. It was never really about whether or not the cure was real, and we spend the whole whole game seeing how violence doesn't even carry the same moral weight in this reality. Everyone left alive has to prioritize their own survival, and at minimum becomes numb to destroying infected human bodies that used to be people. The entire rulebook of this world has changed from what we're used to, and reducing all of that down to violence is bad is cartoonishly kindergarten shit. So why does The Last of Us Part 2 pivot so hard? Well, one, game production is chaos. Developers have to focus on polishing the beginning because most players will never reach the end, and so the finale usually coasts by on a half-baked first draft, probably written by the studio's resident Joss Whedon. Speaking of whom, and two, Neil Druckmann makes it very clear that to him, Ellie's revenge is petty, emotional, and unjust, because in his version of the rulebook, it would be. But for Ellie and Abby, the rules aren't the same. Their context, as women, means revenge isn't just blind rage. It's the only justice they'll ever get, because no one else is coming to deliver it for them. And what makes this so jarring is that the first half of the game understands that perfectly. The writing, pacing, and emotional beats all grasp how complicated this is for them, almost suspiciously well, like it may have benefited from a few more voices than just Neil's one-track moral compass. To make this easier, let's stick to comparing male characters for another minute. This whole idea of ending the cycle of violence is a common theme in stories by and about men, and that's because it actually makes sense in conflicts between people who have roughly equal power. It's a moral question about when enough is enough, and when you, as someone with strength or status, choose to stop fighting because you can. We see it all the time in things like Logan, The Dark Knight, John Wick, even in Star Wars every time a Jedi chooses not to give in to his anger. For men in those stories, refusing to kill can be the ultimate act of control and moral clarity. In contrast, we can look at someone like Inigo Montoya in The Princess Bride, whose entire life revolves around getting revenge for the betrayal and murder of his father.
You killed my father. Prepare to die.
But we don't see this as him giving in to some base, uncontrollable anger. We cheer him on in his quest for justice. When he kills the six-fingered man, the soundtrack doesn't turn somber like we're supposed to grieve for his corrupted soul. It's upbeat. It's satisfying. He won, and now he has no idea what to do next because the thing that was stolen from him can't be replaced, but at least it's settled. So what's the difference? To put it really simply, he's not the original perpetrator. He's the victim. His life is ruined by someone else's cruelty, and no one steps in to make it right. There's no system to punish the Count, and no father left to protect him, so Inigo has to take that role on for himself. He's not a reckless brute who needs to learn empathy. He's a boy who already knows loss and fear far too well, and revenge is his only answer when other forms of justice aren't available. We can see the same thing in Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3, and he's a favorite among a lot of women specifically because his experience mirrors parts of theirs. He was forced not just to serve an abusive master, but to weaponize his own body and sexuality to lure in other innocent victims just to survive. His agency was stolen and he was turned into a monster against his will. So when he finally butchers his abuser, we ain't sad about it. Hell, we helped. Usually by blasting him with a daylight spell for as long as possible just to drag out his pain. F you, Cazador. Meanwhile, in real life, women aren't playing by the same rules as the Neils of the world either.
I think we all do this to some degree. When someone wrongs us, when someone cuts us off on the highway, we have to make the other person pay, in as much, if not more so.
They have to think twice about a walk in broad daylight because some unhinged guy might decide to work out his problems on them. They have to watch how they speak because every word and tone gets scrutinized. They spend hours managing how they look just to be taken seriously or left alone. And when something does happen, they end up like Inigo Montoya. No knight in shining armor, no reparation, no courtroom triumph, just wronged, alone, and stuck. And while that sounds grim, it's actually just the norm for most people. It's only a shock if you're near the top of the pyramid and assume everyone lives with your same safety net. This matters for writing women and anyone else outside your personal bubble because morality isn't a universal law. The same choice doesn't always mean the same thing for two people under wildly different pressures. The Last of Us Part 2 was important because it leveled the playing field. It was a rare story that let women do what so many Liam Neesons have done before. Take their own justice, consequences be damned. The cycle of violence hand-wringing never needed to be included. We watched Ellie grow up. We watched her dad get murdered in front of her, and when she goes out to punish the person who did it, we're on her side, because she's our friend, even when she does things we might not do ourselves. We admittedly don't tend to feel the same about Abby, but there's a very simple reason for that. She's very unlikable. I'm not even just expressing my own opinion. Her friends in the game don't like her. Her dad died not because of random cruelty, but because he was about to cut out a teenager's brain, and then another dad stepped in to stop it. So she spends years ignoring her own life to train up and get revenge, dragging her friends along, torturing Joel to death while his kid watches. And then there's also this time...
She's pregnant. Good.
She's the villain, and that's okay. She's a good one, and it's not unbelievable. Sometimes people suck. It's only a problem because the game tries to convince us we were wrong for judging her before we knew her dad saved a zebra and she isn't mean to trans kids. And so she and Ellie are essentially the same, but they're not. It doesn't help that the cycle of violence lecture is one I've seen wedged into another woman's story this same year. It was never important in Arcane either until they decided to take a moral high ground on everything that happened in the first season, and it's just not that deep of a message. It's like the world's most freshman dorm room epiphany, and it's insulting to have it presented to us like we just have never thought about it before. It's like if a billionaire tells a homeless man that the root of all his problems is that he cares too much about money. Here's an epiphany for you. Most of the time, one side of an argument is actually just more wrong. Like, what are the chances they're both actually equally bad? And I could talk about this for hours. If the show hadn't ripped out everything the franchise did right, dragged the conversation back 40 years, and handed Craig and Neil another excuse to congratulate themselves for being deep. I was worried I was gonna have to convince everybody how bad the second season was, but now that it's over, everyone seems to have figured out that something was seriously wrong with it, even if you're not entirely sure what that was. But I know. The women in The Last of Us all have very clear characteristics, and every single one of them is either subverted or removed in the show. So the question has to exist, why would Neil do that if he actually understood what made his own work successful? Why would Craig do that when he wrote that other good thing once? Could the answer be something more than that they're just the latest in a long line of these Joss Whedon types we've been talking about? No. Neil was the creative director and co-writer of the first game back in 2013, along with game director Bruce Straley. He's credited as the primary artist behind Joel and Ellie's relationship and the creator of most key story beats, and you can see from behind-the-scenes videos that he was pretty hands-on with the motion capture performances as well. He's also the face of the production team. He's the guy in the interviews talking up the next level narrative storytelling, and he sells it. He's good at the press tour stuff. And if it had ended there, we'd probably never have a reason to suspect he didn't know what he was talking about. But now, we live in the future, and we have another game and his attempts to revisit both stories as a TV show to compare to. It's not some weird accident that his depiction of these characters and world got sloppier and less relatable over time. And since we've seen this play out before with other writers, it's extremely important to actually imagine what that process looked like. While Neil definitely deserves credit for his work shaping the script and the narrative of the first game, Bruce and Neil himself have described the Naughty Dog environment as being highly collaborative at the time, with directors, animators, level designers, actors, and other uncredited writers like Haley Gross all contributing and modifying ideas on the fly.
It was written that Ellie sort of was just kind of watching on the side. If this were real life, I would do something.
We did a couple takes, and at some point she walked up to me and she said, I feel like I'd hit him.
So we added in a part, like, right there off the bat, she's not just this damsel in distress.
And actually that made us go back and rethink combat and rethink a lot of the areas in the game.
Having a collaborative environment with a solid chain of command is the way these giant projects get made well, and famous film directors who consistently produce good work have gotten used to this kind of workflow. Everybody has weaknesses and blind spots, and mature artists know to surround themselves with people who will help them cover those holes while also maintaining a strong central vision and knowing when to put their foot down. This isn't usually the story we hear though, because for some reason it's much more appealing, or maybe just easier, to push the idea that one artist was primarily responsible for a story. I experienced this myself when I tried to shoot a TV pilot. The script was equally created by my co-writers, Ian and Allison, and we wanted people to go to any of us if they had questions because we trusted each other's decisions. But the crew did not like that. People were insistent on coming to me, who they had deemed the main guy, and largely ignored Ian and Allison even though they were just as qualified to answer, and I was busy. It's the kind of thing I could see easily going to someone's head over a long period of time across multiple projects. It's clearly something Joss Whedon indulged in, and it was already forming for Neil in the early days of The Last of of Us. But Neil was not the primary mind behind that story. Even if he had final say over most creative decisions, the number of people adding their input all along the process means that by the end of it, he would have only directly contributed a small percentage of what we see in the final product. A bigger percentage than any other individual maybe, but less than the sum of their collective input. That's just how it works, and that's good, because sometimes your creative director has some concerning ideas. One of Neil's earliest pitches for the game involved a fungal outbreak that infected only women, and the story would revolve around the immune men who would be capturing and exploiting them for research. Meanwhile, Ellie, the child, would be the only known uninfected woman in the world. This idea got shut down, and Neil has always publicly acknowledged it was a messed up idea that he learned a lesson from. But let's explore just for a minute what he was working with there, because I think it's important for understanding his motivations moving forward. Let's think for one goddamn minute about how a virus would affect only women. Think to the end of that thought. Not a good answer. The ick you feel in your stomach is very mildly confirmed by the concept art Neil presented of zombie women in their underwear, but luckily, he was talked out of this women-only body horror narrative.
And the reason it failed is because it was a misogynistic idea. It's hard for me to say, and I'm kind of airing some dirty laundry here, but a lot of the female workers at Naughty Dog came up and said, I don't like this idea. I understand what you're trying to do, but the way it's coming off is you have a bunch of women turning into monsters and you're shooting them in the face. I had a lot of attachments to the idea and I refused to kind of let it go, but eventually I did have this kind of awakening and I realized that was not good.
Now, did it take multiple women and his male co-writer coming forward to advise him against the decision because, by his own admission, he refused to let it go? I mean, yeah, but the past is the past. And that singular moment rewired him to become a proper feminist icon. A man who not only knows what he did wrong, but can confidently write oral rape scenes with the beauty and gentleness of a reformed misogynist. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Reflection is good. Being able to publicly acknowledge your own flaws is often a green flag, but that flag only stays green if there's follow-up. You have to actually change the things you realized were wrong. The problem with Neil and Joss is that they love talking about these big keystone lessons they supposedly learned while continuing to show us through their art that those lessons maybe didn't sink in so much, because that wasn't Neil's only idea for this game that placed women into weirdly subservient supporting roles. He's talked about how he always at least wanted an older male character protecting a female character. His early concept for Ellie was a mute girl whose purpose was to communicate with the male character solely through actions instead of dialogue. He really paints a picture of his own broad views on women, at least during the time he was working on the one installment of this franchise that everyone universally agrees was great. This kind of implies that his writing wasn't featured as heavily as he lets on, and that it should have only improved from here. I wonder if it will. Neil loves to describe his newfound lack of sexism as an awakening, one where he realized that women are in fact people, and the characters we see are role models for those people. You see, he has a daughter, and is there anything more heartwarming than a man who doesn't think about how women are people until he has a daughter? So that's the man behind the genius. And while we may never know the names of those women whose heroic duty it was to shut him down and teach him the concept of empathy, we salute you. It didn't fix him or anything, but you helped create an awesome game that resonated with women everywhere. We've already covered the second game quite a bit, so it's probably no surprise that by the time it was in production, Neil was the sole creative director and also vice president of Naughty Dog itself. Haley Gross officially became the co-writer for this one, and the creative team was expanded to handle the bigger game, but there was nobody to challenge Neil's final decisions in quite the same way. And you can tell which parts are his. It's the structural elements of switching between Ellie and Abby, killing Joel early, and making the player feel conflicted about the revenge, obviously. He's very proud of them. So proud, in fact, that if Neil is truly famous for anything, it's probably basking in the hatred received by the second game and openly baiting further complaints. And please don't get me wrong, a lot of the initial backlash to the second game was sexist and transphobic and extremely unacceptably vile, like people were threatening the lives of the actors. But hey, why provoke them? He later deleted that post and acknowledged that he should be better than that, but that's kinda his rhythm. Do the not okay thing, have to be told it's not okay, and then walk it back and say it wasn't okay. But he's never quite learning, is he? Then, sometime in 2021, Neil found his next writing partner in overnight sensation Craig Mazin, most famous for writing the sequels to Scary Movie and Hangover franchises, before making...
There was nothing sane about Chernobyl.
That seems inconsistent. But okay, let's look at the positives. He must have some strengths in retelling something that's already happened and adapting existing content from other people's stories. And he clearly has a knack for blunt dread and body horror, so maybe he'll be the perfect fit. He just needs to balance Neil's weaknesses, so as long as he's not a sexist who constantly sucks up to Neil and misinterprets his entire source material's core themes, it should be a slam dunk. The truth is, we all should have seen this coming at the start of season 1. My wife pointed it out at the time, and I said, well, they might still be able to save it, and I have still not finished eating those words. Remember Tess? I talked about her in one of my first video essays. She's the Sarah Connor of the mushroom zombie apocalypse, except better because she's not doing it all just so her shitty cautionary tale of a son can eventually take the spotlight. Game Tess is, put simply, the person in charge. Mob boss energy is her primary personality trait. Joel's just her attack dog and side piece and is perfectly comfortable being the one to go unnoticed. Every scene she's in, she's the one holding the authority and navigating the conversation. Writing female characters is not just about understanding women, it's also about the people they interact with. Men who respect women do so passively, existing side by side without even the consideration of gendered leadership. We learn that Tess is a natural leader by comparing her to the men who don't have the same skill or interests like Joel and Tommy. The ways that others treat Tess is just as important for defining who she is as her own actions. She's the one people move out of the way for, she's the one important people speak to, and she's the one who shoots first when people don't cooperate. In the show, Tess is a fraction of the person we see in the game. All of her agency as a character has been effectively removed, and most of it given to Joel, which immediately and dramatically alters both characters. All of her major plot beats in this version come from sheer coincidence instead of her own force of will. Like, instead of her determination to recover what she's owed being the catalyst for the whole adventure, she just kind of runs into some fireflies when they attack a QZ, and nobody respects her here like they do in the game. Like, why even include her if she's not accomplishing her role in the story? You'd think Neil would notice, being the original writer and no longer a misogynist. Tess's character assassination could have been more than enough to predict these dudes' perspectives on women for the rest of the series, but what really should have sealed the deal for everyone was this. Disturbing, I think we can all agree. But it's possible that a lot of people glossed over why it was disturbing. You might have brushed it off as just a gross horror scene and tried to forget it happened because that's a survival instinct. But let's ask some questions for a minute. Like, hey, why? Why does this happen in the show when it doesn't happen in the game? Game Tess is chased down by Fedra and goes out in a hail of gunfire, the only acceptable way an action hero can die. So why did they change it to zombies and give her a new plan that required her to stand perfectly still while a zombie man forced his mouth tendrils down her throat? Those aren't a part of the game either, by the way. Did they think Tess's original final stand was too cool and predictable? Did they specifically want to create this situation? Why did they linger on it so long in a close-up so we could see the entire thing play out in real time? They could have cut away and left it up to our sick imaginations, but they chose to shoot and edit it this way, almost like they wanted to make it sexual and got some gross thrill out of presenting it like that. Why did they decide to introduce this new genre of horror to the story? There's plenty to draw from in the games as it is, and none of it involves forced bodily penetration. Is that just Craig's biggest personal fear or something? Most importantly, why did it happen to Tess? Why did they feel the need to not only undermine every strength of their one adult female protagonist, but also remove her ability to defend herself and then violate her with a corpse before incinerating her? Could it be, possibly, that Craig just kinda hates women, and Neil is too caught up in being a genius to give a fuck? Am I jumping to conclusions about the intentions of two men I don't know based solely on my subjective observations? Or did they openly admit to everything I've said so far in a podcast published by HBO?
What is the kiss to you?
Because there's already so much horror of what's happening, right? It's like these tendrils coming out of this infected mouth. It's going down her throat. Instead of shooting it in a creepy way, let's shoot it in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
Like backlit, silhouetted, profile view.
I love the way we did that because it's underscoring again the theme of love and the way love functions, because the fungus loves too. It makes more of itself. That's what we do when we love each other. What we are may look disgusting, and the way we reproduce may be horrifying and violated, but it is tender, When this man comes to her, it's not violent because she's not fighting. If she ran, if she fought back, they
It's
would
a different
all
scene.
they would take her apart.
Yeah.
But she's just standing there, and he very gently shares of himself. Anything penetrative is disgusting and scary when you're dealing with monsters, and yet also weirdly, like Neil said, especially the way he shot it, beautiful. That's so much more interesting than like Fedra showed up and shot her.
Hey, Craig. What the fuck? That was the creepiest way anyone has ever said anything. Also, Troy Baker sucks too, but everybody knew that already, so. The answer to the original question, by the way, is that this was disturbing because you understood intuitively that the writers of this show purposely made you watch Tess get mouth-raped by a zombie before she died. They love that they did that, and you could tell. Tess was unfortunately only the first domino to fall, and everything that happens to her echoes through the other female characters throughout season 2. The second game, above all else, is about
the theme of love.
No, it's about anger, if you're gonna get all reductionist about it. It's a story about Ellie's anger. That is her primary character trait, and we share in it. We are with her while she grows up, through every major trauma, and finally when her only family is murdered in front of her. We feel her pain, and we are at her side for every merciless stealth takedown on the way to avenging Joel's death, fueled by carefully placed memories of what could have been. We did the same as Joel, so why wouldn't we do it as the girl we spent that whole game protecting? And we certainly never question her ability to do it. I mean, I don't even know why I'm saying that, because we watched her develop all those skills, so there's no reason anyone would even ask that question unless they were, what's the word?
We wanted to explore how somebody who is Bella's size fights. And the world is full of people that are bigger than her. The idea that Ellie is like, I know my size. Teach me how to do violence.
Sexist. The word is sexist, like vintage style sexist. Also, what an insane thing to say about characters you cast yourself. You know, we're talking about Ellie Williams, destroyer of carotid arteries. Ellie in season 2 is a joke. Honestly, even calling her Ellie feels like a lie. She's been completely stripped of her anger and barely wants anything. Other characters have to keep telling her to be mad about Joel because Craig and Neil made her into this aimless, blank-faced stoner. I'm not even sure they gave her a single positive character trait. They establish her as dumb, ungrateful, gross, selfish, and maybe worst of all, boring? The only way to misunderstand an existing character this bad is if you secretly hate her.
So when you're Joel, you feel one way. When you're Ellie, you feel different. And you play differently. You're more scared because you're smaller.
Like, while Craig was playing what he describes as his favorite video game, was he just fuming the whole time at Ellie for taking him on this revenge mission? Or maybe he hates himself so much that he just projected all of that onto Ellie. And so in the show, that's just his self-insert. It would also explain why Ellie is written like a stereotypical gross man with no hint of the female experience whatsoever. Or it's because she's a lesbian, and it's that sexism thing again. Hey, I wonder who Craig does like.
Dina loves people. She is so different from Ellie and Joel. I think she represents a much more positive, healthy way to be. She's wild. She loves life. Dina is this ray of sunshine. And Isabella Merced, you can feel the warmth radiating off of her. You want to be her friend because she's so funny and on top of stuff.
She's charming.
Yeah.
She's charming. She's really, really charming.
Aw, he must want her to be his girlfriend. Dina's primary trait in the game is gay. I mean that very endearingly. She is not confused. She is bisexual, and she picks Ellie, unlike whatever is happening in the first few episodes of the show. It could be argued that she doesn't have much going on in the story outside of hyping up and supporting Ellie, but it's obvious that she had her own whole life before the events of the game, and she's just as awesome as every other character. Game Dina is calm, collected, clear-sighted, careful, charming, cool. She falls through a hole to defend Ellie and stares a clicker down without flinching in the first combat encounter, until she's sure it sees them and then executes it without hesitation. Meanwhile, Show Dina just stays up there. And it would be really easy to write that character as a flawless Mary Sue, because someone who projects that image is a challenge to write, honestly. But she still feels completely realistic. She's far from perfect or invulnerable and is clearly terrified and out of her depth. But in the show, Dina is written like the most stereotypical straight man's wish fulfillment of a love interest I've ever seen. You know the type. She travels the post-apocalyptic wasteland armed with a full makeup kit and her Dyson Airwrap so she can be the only person in the world who wakes up looking like an Instagram model. She's smart, but not too smart, sassy, but only in a cute way, traumatized, but she doesn't need your help. She's got a feisty personality and a soft heart, and will of course one day be an amazing mother to Craig. I mean Craig's children. I mean Ellie's children.
I'm gonna be a dad.
Good news though, I found all of Ellie's positive personality traits. Turns out Dina took them. But don't worry, she watered them all down so that she wouldn't outperform Jesse. Finally, we have Abby. And I'm feeling optimistic because there could not be a simpler character. Abby has 2 traits, buff as hell and hates Joel Miller.
You actually are pretty handsome.
Craig! Why is she so small?
Well, we didn't feel like we were obliged to fully represent the same body shape that Abby has. The key was to find a certain ferocity and a relentlessness.
It's her entire personality, Craig. She's been thinking about one thing for 4 years. Joel killed her dad, and so she's gonna kill Joel, and so she has to be somebody who can kill Joel with her bare hands. She is so singularly obsessed with this one act of vengeance that we can see it in her body. One look at her and we know that she has spent every day for 4 years doing German volume training, devouring more eggs than Gaston knows how to count, and perfecting her golf swing while maintaining eye contact with a picture of Joel she has carved into a wall. It's all she has. She's not a likable person. She's not a valuable asset aside from being insanely strong. It's how she survives the nightmare scenarios she constantly seems to find herself in. How is this girl
Oh yeah, they said he's handsome.
gonna do this stuff? How can you seriously describe reverting what may be the only female bodybuilder protagonist in all of fiction back into the same stereotypical representation of a woman we've seen a million times as an opportunity to delve into someone who is physically more vulnerable? You really think you're breaking new ground there? Be honest, are you just one of those guys on Twitter who complained about Abby's muscles being unrealistic when the game first came out? Was this whole show a ploy to get your revenge on Neil? Because he's not gonna notice. He doesn't even know what's going on most of the time. And by the way, this is Abby's body model. When you figure out what actually defines a woman, you'll also come to realize that the other 99% of that character's identity can be anything you want, and you're still writing a woman. That part is important, but it's far from everything. We could be exploring so many untapped varieties of people, and The Last of Us games do exactly that. And it makes the existence of this adaptation in 2025 so embarrassing. We've got to stop giving the benefit of the doubt to these misogynist egomaniacs who only end up in this position because they have the audacity to tell some clueless studio executive that they know about feminism. When somebody asks, how could Craig Mazin be a bad writer if he made Chernobyl? Don't just chalk it up to one of life's great mysteries. Look into it a little. Check to see if the thing shaped like a fluke is a fluke. Make sure there's not a clip of Craig telling you outright that he finds the concept of female sexuality disgusting before defending his intentions just because he wrote a gay male love story once. When the next Joss Whedon stands on a stage and declares that he loves equality, we should really all compare that to his writing before we just collectively believe him. Because at this point, I've had to listen to so many balding schlubs wax poetic about what it means to write strong women, I can basically predict everything they're gonna say.
I always wanted to know, like, what was this, just some weird random genetic thing? Like, why is she immune? What I loved so much about it was that the answer was soaking in sadness.
Except Craig, he's a new breed, I'll give him that. Can you say anything normal?
The fungus loves too.
Thank you for listening to me yell about another video game adaptation. I might hate writers, except for you, you watcher of my writing advice videos. You're amazing, I love you, and I have this Patreon. The next video to come out will be the first proper episode of the Doormaster Anniversary Specials, so if you'd like to get your name listed on the front of it as a producer, head on over to patreon.com/Doormaster and sign up for the limited time anniversary tier. If you donate for even 1 month, you'll get a credit on every anniversary video that comes after, and you help offset the cost of not making topical YouTube videos. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions in the comments, and good luck writing women better than these guys, which is it's not a very high bar. Thanks to some dubious magical items, I have not slept in days. Coincidentally, our sponsor today is Goblin Society Games. They're a small game development company and a Doormonster fan. They publish supplementary content for D&D and other tabletop RPGs. Things like Murkrag's Compendium of Curios, which contains 300 illustrated original items for D&D 5th edition. I absolutely love this thing because my favorite thing to do as a dungeon master is just throw game-changing magical items into random chests and let my players stumble upon them and then ruin my plans.
because it's fun. And this book is full of them. It's made with an emphasis on less frequently used equipment like sickles, clubs, torches, ammunition, arcane focuses. Also prioritizes special abilities over like raw damage, things that add new mechanics and let you do new things. My personal favorite is the Chronoscope, which is a spyglass that lets you see up to 1,000 years into the past of whatever landscape you're looking at. I don't know what you would use that for, but I know one of my players would come up with some insane way to subvert everything I put in their path using nothing but magical time sites. They're a really cool company, and they also have several of their own original games. Thank you for watching. Thank you for donating, buying, all the things. I should go sleep.